Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 8 of Diary of an Indie Game Dev. And today we're going to be diving into, I don't know, it's a fairly rich topic. Previous episodes we've covered a lot of different aspects of building a business, running a brand. This is going to be in the same vein, but we're going to be talking a little bit about the behind the scenes kind of some of the stuff that can come up when you're working with people over a long period of time and what you kind of need to expect kind of on a long run thing here. So let's see if we can adjust the camera just a little bit. I guess if you look back to the very beginning, I would have probably looked at this as something where I would have had possibly, I have just as much passion today as I had back then, but it's been definitely tempered by just the realities of a long-term project like this. I think when we first started off, none of us really understood we kind of knew, but we didn't understand the level of commitment that we were getting into, and there were a lot of things that we probably didn't consider at the very beginning. So we'll talk about a few of those in this episode. So first and foremost is that passion isn't enough to drive a project. It's not. We've all been blessed here on this team to have an extremely passionate group of people, but at the end of the day, passion only gets you a part of the way. It does definitely come back to the blood, sweat, and tears of the people who are willing to sacrifice to make the dream a reality. And part of that is that not everyone is willing to put in the efforts that are required to be a team player and sacrifice for the greater good. That's not to say that the people who can't sacrifice aren't, they're not bad people. It's just that for whatever reason, for whatever thing, whatever thing is going on in their life, they have things that are getting in the way of them being able to commit 100% to the project. And I think I talked about this in a previous episode when I was talking about clock punchers. When you're an employee, it's really easy to just call in sick, or if you have an off day, you're just like, you know what, I'm gonna take the weekend off and I'm gonna go play this new game that just came out, and I'm just gonna go, blow off for 4 or 5 days. But the reality is that when you're a business partner, you can't do that. So passion isn't really the only thing. It is about being willing to step up and sacrifice and dedicate. There also needs to be the desire to go above and beyond. So a good example of this is maybe you don't have the exact skill set that's required, and you need somebody to pick up a certain area. I'm going to use this as an example. So in the very beginning of the project, we didn't have any dedicated world builders. So my brother already had a little bit of experience, and so he was working on that, but we needed more people. So I said, I'll do it. I've got the time, the dedication, passion. I'm willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears to make it happen. So I spent about 3 months putting in 40 to 60 hours a week of learning Unity and just diving into tutorials. I had a lynda.com subscription, tons of tutorial videos on YouTube, tons of tutorial videos on the Unity platform itself. And so over the course of 3 months, I taught myself how to do world building. Now, I'm not that great at it, but the point is I was willing to get out there and do it and make it happen. And that's something that has to be done. It's not always going to be, delegate. Sometimes you can't delegate. Sometimes you have to be willing to take the gloves off and get your hands dirty and get down in the mud. The second thing is that you have to realize that not everyone is going to be cut out to be a business owner. And this kind of taps into passion not being enough to drive the project, but it also just kind of comes back around to not everyone has what it takes to be an owner, because they can't transcend the employee mentality. There's a really good article over on Eurogamer from 2018. It was in October. The article title you'll find it in the it's a linked in the patron post associated with this video. But basically, excuse me, the video is covering the controversy that popped up at the end of last year with Rockstar and all of these people supposedly working all these horrible crunch hours on Red Dead Redemption 2. Probably one of my favorite components of the article was there was a section where someone was saying, and this was from the UK, so I guess there was somebody from the company basically came out and said, if you don't like the hours and you don't like the job you have, then feel free to quit and go get a job at Tesco. So Tesco is kind of like, in the US we have Safeway and Walmart and all these other supermarket stores. It's the equivalent of that. It's basically telling someone if you don't like the job and you don't like the hours, then quit and go be a minimum wage clock puncher somewhere else. Because in the video game industry, you are getting paid an exceptionally good wage to be in AAA game development. You're getting paid overtime to work that crunch, and you're being very fairly compensated for your time. So there had been a discussion, I think it was over in the Vanguard emulator Discord, but I basically copy and pasted my comments from another place, and I'm going to kind of read through those here. I said, first and foremost, every industry has crunch periods, mandatory overtime and beyond. And we actually covered this, by the way, in a previous episode when we talked about crunch. It doesn't matter if you're talking about tourism, hospitality, construction, whatever. Pretty much every person under the sun has had to work overtime at some point in their life. Very few people want to work overtime unless they're being, extremely well compensated, or unless they're extremely passionate about what they're doing for a living, in which case it's not work, it's fun. So let's pause for a minute and break that part down. If you love what you're doing, regardless of whether or not you're being compensated, you will be putting in 150% because it doesn't feel like work. You're actually having fun. You're working on a hobby. You're working on something that is your dream job. You're not just grinding out hours. You're doing something that you always wanted to do. And if that's the case, then you're going to be going above and beyond regardless of compensation because that's just what you want to do. Secondly, if no labor laws were being broken, then Rockstar has done nothing wrong from a legal standpoint. Disgruntled employees aside, opinions expressed in the press mean nothing. Only legalities matter. Thirdly, AAA development is a highly paid and highly competitive industry. Minimum wage clock punchers need not apply. So I kind of get these rumored comments about, if you don't like it, go work at Tesco, because I have the exact same mentality. If you don't like your job, find a different one. This actually, many years ago, around the time that tipping in the United States was going up from 15 to 21% or whatever it was, and let me take a further step back and say, I had also by that point been traveling all around the world, and I hadn't lived abroad for a lot at that point. I had done some living abroad. This is probably 2006, 2007, and I didn't start living abroad full-time until 2008. But I've been around the world enough to know that the United States is pretty much the only country on the planet where waiters and staff at restaurants get paid illegal, in my opinion. It's illegal wages, and rely on tips to make up their income because their bosses are too cheap. Everywhere else in the world, they get paid standard industry rates to work, and tips are completely optional, and 99% of the time people don't tip because it's just not the custom. It's like that pretty much every country you go to. Only in the US is tipping considered mandatory. And this is when I was still working construction and had a small company, and I went into lunch with two of my guys, and it was a burger and beers dive up in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. And we went in, had lunch, paid cash, left whatever we had, change and etc. left over. The girl ended up getting like a 19% tip. And again, this was right when tips were going from 15 to 21%, nothing official. It's still not official. But But, we left a 19% tip, which was basically, it was us just, whatever cash we had in our pocket, that's what we left on the table. And the equivalent, was like 19%. The waitress followed us out of the restaurant and proceeded in front of witnesses to call us assholes for not leaving a 21% tip. I promptly went back into the restaurant, got the manager, talked about what just happened, had all the witnesses confirm what just happened, and she got fired on the spot. Now, some people might say that's a dick move. I don't think it was. The dick move was following me out of the restaurant and complaining about a 19% tip because you just served 6 other tables. And this was the rant that I gave her when I went off on her was, you just served 6 tables in the time that you served ours. If you're getting a $5 to $7 tip per table, you're making at least, $30 an hour compared to my 2 employees who just came to lunch with me who are getting paid $22 an hour. One guy was getting 22, the other guy was getting 25. So you're making more money than my employees are making, and they're making industry standard wages for construction. So you have no right to complain about a 19% tip, and if you don't like your job, you can quit and go somewhere else. And she proceeded to go on her little rant, and the manager got involved and she got fired. It always comes back to that for me, though. If you don't like your job and you're not happy with the wage, there are plenty of people who will take your place, and there are lots of other jobs where you can be happy doing something that you actually love doing as opposed to doing something that you hate but you're doing just because you need a paycheck to survive. I don't subscribe to the whole bullshit idea of, everybody's got to work and you just got to suck it up. No, you don't. You do not have to suck it up. We live in the 21st century. There are literally thousands of different types of jobs available. If you don't like your job, find one that you do like where you can thrive and actually have a healthy work-life balance. Don't stick around in some place that you hate just to get a paycheck. That's literally stupid, and I can't help you. That's on you. So, when you look at overtime, if people are working crunch and everything else and they're being compensated, labor laws are in place, etc., there's a big difference between someone feeling like they're overworked and someone who's actually overworked. As a business owner, I can tell you 150% I'm overworked. I'm overworked and underpaid because I don't make any money working on the Saga of Lucimia, and I put in 12-hour days, and I've been doing that for 4.5 years. I am the epitome of overworked and underpaid, but because this is my dream job, I don't care. I'm doing it because it makes me happy. It's what I want to be doing. So, this is one of those things where, not everyone is cut out to be a business owner because some people cannot transcend the employee mentality. They're always going to be employees no matter where they go. And when you're running a business, you have to have people on your board of directors or your teammates or whatever. They have to be people who can be business owners and not employees. Which leads me to, unless you're extremely lucky in your business partners, you can expect some of them to fall along the wayside as you go out through the course of a project. It's life. It's happened to many, many bands over the years. There have been many bands who became successful. Just thinking recently, because I know Tool just made an announcement that they've got a new album coming out. They had a bass player who was with them during the very early years, who did the first album with them, and then just decided it just wasn't going to work out. It wasn't going to work out for him for whatever reasons. And that's a person who didn't want to pursue it anymore. It wasn't really their dream. And if it's not really their dream, there's no blame. It's just they weren't cut out to be a business owner. They needed to do something else with their lives, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, thirdly is that you cannot plan for everything. On a project like an mmorpg, you're jumping into bed with people on a project that's going to take 6 to 8 years. I've probably talked about this briefly in the past, but we've had people on the team now. My brother's had 2 children during the course of the project. John's had 3 children, I think, during the course of the project. So, children change things for people big time, and you can't plan for that. That's not, you get into a project like this, the first 2 years everything's going one way, and then something happens and everything changes, and now it has to be a different way. That's life. None of us can plan that far ahead, especially when you start looking at how quickly the gaming market changes. 2 years ago, no one knew that Fortnite was going to be the success it is today. Like, just, what was it, a couple days ago, you had this first big Fortnite arena event. 16-year-old kid walks away with a $3 million grand prize. I mean, there's, 250 million people worldwide playing Fortnite. No one saw that coming. And as a result, that has completely changed the dynamic of the gaming industry over the last 4 years. Now everybody wants to be doing battle royales, and before battle royales it was looter shooters, and before looter shooters it was whatever. Things change so quickly. You can have a 10-year plan, but the reality is that's only a very rough outline, because things are going to change so much between now and then that you're going to have to be able to adapt. So you can't plan for everything. You have to be able to roll with the punches, and professionals can. Adapt, overcome. That's just part of entrepreneurship. And I would also say that you're going to very quickly find out who the dead weight is, because they're either going to be unwilling or incapable of adapting with the needs of the project. And these are moments when friendships are tested. But at the end of the day, this comes to point 4. You have to be able to separate business from personal. That is so tricky for some people. I want to say, I got to tell a little story about one of the very first workshops that my wife and I ran years ago, 2014 maybe. No names, because I keep that out of it. But we had some students come down. We were teaching these 3-month courses in Cancun on brand building, marketing, social media, etc. First round of students come in, and this individual had, we screened everybody in advance. We did a lot of interviews before we accepted the students. It wasn't just about who can pay. It was about, who can pay, but also really needs the class and who's going to be a right fit for what we have. Because a lot of people have ideas about what they think working from home is like and working online is like, and then there's the reality of it. So we had this individual who was like a bartender working like 3 different jobs, I think, and didn't really have a lot of experience other than just kind of dabbling in blogging over the years. And this individual, after they got on site, turns out that they had a lot of personal issues going on with other individuals in their lives, and just a lot of personality issues and challenges. And we were probably 3 weeks, 4 weeks into the course at that point, and there came a moment when this individual questioned, during a class session in front of all the other students, was like, well, what do you think about this, and this? And I said, well, because her question was, what do you think about this, and this? There's this other social media person who teaches classes who says that we should be doing this, and this. And I said, that's great. If you want to send me the links to that information, I'm more than happy to take a look at it. And if it's something that I think is worth putting into my courses, then I'll go ahead and do that. But by that point, I was successful enough that I have my own way of doing things. This way works. I'm teaching you guys my way. It's no different than construction. You talk to 10 carpenters on how to hang a door, you're going to get 10 different versions of how to hang a door, because everybody's going to do it slightly different, but they all end up with the same result. So she sent me her stuff. I looked through it. It was like, it's really nothing different than what I'm teaching, just a slightly different point of view. So it's great, but not anything that I felt that I needed to put into my classes. And I just left it at that. She sent me this stuff. I said, thanks, I'll look into it. And that was it. So the next morning I'm teaching classes, and we're halfway through the class, and she literally sits up and says, well, why aren't you talking about all the things that I sent you last night? That's very valuable information. And I said, it is good information. It's also the same things that I'm teaching in a couple of the upcoming courses, so we'll be getting to that later. And she proceeded to lose it in front of the whole class, and we had to literally stop the class, and I had to take her outside and have a 30-minute talk about how you shouldn't do that. And this is when she proceeded to have a meltdown and basically went up on some stairs so that she could be above me and was yelling, literally yelling and screaming down at me about how I didn't value her opinion and that I was just some dipshit and all this other stuff. And she was going off about how she felt like because I didn't include her information in the course, that I therefore didn't value her opinion and I thought that she was worthless. That never happened. That was not the intent. And I basically, the way I explained it to her was like, look, if you go to a college course, you don't go to the professor and tell the professor what he or she should be teaching. You're there because the professor is the expert and you, the student, are there to learn. When you signed up for this class, you said you didn't know anything about social media, and you were, you're a bartender. So suddenly you're standing here telling me that you're the expert on all of this subject matter and that you know more than I do. So which is it? And it proceeded to, it was a very unfortunate confrontation. She was not able to separate business from personal, and at the end of the day, we ended up refunding her money and sent her home because the other students literally came to me and said she just needs to go away. So we did. We gave her her money back, and she went home because this individual could not separate personal from professional. And unfortunately, you're always going to find that in business. And the interesting thing about working with a lot of people in the same project is at the end of the day, we all want to make something really, really good. Going back to the tool example, I was just watching Maynard's interview on Joe Rogan's podcast the other night, and he was talking. They were asking like, why hadn't they put their music up on the streaming outlets previously? And Maynard literally went, he goes, I love my brothers. I'm gonna plead the fifth, and Rogan pushed him a little bit, and he said, it's just conversations that happened, maybe conversations that didn't happen, something that's all I'm willing to say on it. So what you can get from that is that much like any sort of project where there are multiple personalities involved, is all of these people are extremely passionate about what they're producing. And they have arguments, just like family members have arguments, but they're able to overcome that and separate business from professional and say, at the end of the day, we still love each other and we're still brothers and sisters. We just don't see eye to eye on these things. And that's how adults and professionals should be operating, is even if you have a difference of opinion, you do what's best for the company, regardless of your personal feelings on things. And that's really tricky for some people, and not everybody's going to be capable of that. Because it's really hard to strip emotion out of things, and you really can't 100% of the time. But the important thing to remember is why? Why is everyone so hot and bothered about things? And it's because you're all trying to get something out that is the best possible product. So when you look at it at that angle, it's a little bit easier to understand why everyone is so passionate and how sometimes tempers can flare. And that's just natural. I mean, the bigger the project gets, the more you're going to have that. I mean, in a perfect world, it'll be to a minimum, but we all have moments where we're going to butt heads on things, and at the end of the day, it's important to see why are we butting heads, and then talk through it and get to the resolution, and as long as you can do that, you're golden. And that's one of the things I love about our team, is that even when we do have these moments where we butt heads, we've always been willing to step back and look at it from the other person's angle, and after 10, 15 minutes, sometimes an hour or so, but eventually after a lot of conversation, we end up finding out that we were all on the same page to begin with. It was just like someone didn't say it in a certain way, or someone didn't understand it the way the person intended it, or things of this nature. But once you're willing to work through that, you'll find your way to the end result, which is happiness for everyone. And the fifth and probably most challenging component is you have to be willing to let people go, and cut dead weight. And that's tough, especially if you're friends with people, because no one wants to see someone get left by the wayside. But again, people's lives change, people's priorities change. Lots of things can happen. We have been pretty steady with the crew of 14, 15 that we've had now for the past, The contractors came on board at the beginning of 2017, so we've had pretty steady numbers for 2 years. But then we've had like Andrew, Wendy, they've been on board for about 3 years, and then Richard and Bobby have been like 3.5, I think, maybe a little bit longer than that. So it's been a pretty steady team for 3.5 years. So if you look back to the first, like, say, first 12 to 18 months of our project, like when we were first getting going, there's probably, off the top of my head, I don't want to go down through the list of names. There's probably a dozen people who are no longer with us that originally started with us or came on board for like 3 months to do a test run and just didn't pan out. So a good example is we had another Richard with us in the very, very beginning who actually played in our original Project 1999 group. And we got about 8 months into the project and he just came to us and said, guys, I can't keep doing this. It's not going to work out, because he was having lots of life stuff going on. He was having he was moving, girlfriend issues, just a bunch of other stuff. And so at the end of the day, it wasn't going to work out for him. And no hard feelings, it was just one of those things where it's not going to work out. So you do what you need to do. We had another kid from New Zealand who was a really good programmer who came on. I think his name is Jade, for example, at the end of 2014, I believe. So he was around for maybe 3-4 months. We took a break for Christmas. He wasn't the only one, actually. We had like 4 people at the end of 2014 who came on like October-ish, did like a 3-month run. We took a month break for Christmas, and when we came back from Christmas, none of these guys came back. They just quit responding to emails and just never came back to the project. And at that point in time, you just got to cut them loose. The project has to move on regardless of whether or not these people are going to, be able to hold up their end of the bargain or not. So, project moves on no matter what. And that is tricky sometimes if people are friends. If you're good friends with a person and they have something that pops up in their life and they just can't continue anymore, it does hurt, on a personal level. But at the same time, it's a business. And just like looking at these bands, there have been many, many bands over the years where band members who were part of the initial LP and maybe the first album, they make it. But then once the band starts touring full time, they're like, I can't do this, guys. Like, I got to be away from my family 350 days out of 365, living in hotel rooms, working 16-hour days, flights, sleeping on buses, living on hotel food. Like, I just can't do this. It's just too much. It's too much stress. It's not what I really wanted. It's not what I thought it was going to be. These are all, good examples. And, there doesn't have to be any hard feelings about that kind of stuff. It's just a matter of these are heavy projects, and heavy projects require people who are willing to, be able to handle the load and not crack. It's tough, but it is something where if you're going to do this, if it's your dream job, you'll make it happen. So just some further insight into kind of some, behind the scenes stuff with business, and what you should expect if you're going to be doing something on a project of this scope, because it's not going to be quick and it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be clean. It's going to be dirty, hard. It's going to be long hours, blood, sweat, and tears. But at the end of the day, it's all worth it if it's your dream. So you have to make a decision if it's just a dream or if it's actually your destiny. So questions, comments, etc. Don't forget to hit up the patron post associated with this. Thanks to everybody who's been supporting so far. We had some new patrons coming in this past week with the new Mondays in mmorpg episode. Stay tuned for that. Got a new one coming to you guys live tomorrow. So thanks, everyone. See you in a couple weeks with the next episode of Diary of an Indie Game Dev, and weekly for Mondays in mmorpg and beyond. Don't forget, I'm streaming daily on Twitch, and I'm also on Twitter and Facebook. We also opened up a new Discord, Renfell's Refuge. Check out the links in this video. Adios.